Texas Democrat Nicole Collier has rejected a mandatory police escort imposed by Republican leaders as Democrats returned from a walkout over redistricting, choosing instead to stay overnight in the state capitol in protest.
Announced, once quorum was restored, that the call of the House would remain, and any member that was out because of the quorum break would be required to sign a permission slip agreeing to be under the authority of DPS in order to leave the Capitol. I refused. I refused to sign the permission slip to be able to leave the Capitol. I disagree with that authoritarian tactic that they have taken. As being part of the minority party, we don't have a lot of victories, but we do have our principles. We still have our dignity, and we still have the right to protest and resist. I will have to stay here. I hadn't really given much thought. What matters to me is making sure that I resist and fight back against and push back. I'm sure I'll fall asleep eventually, whether that's in my chair or on the floor. I'm sure I will get some rest, but I'm so appreciative of my Democratic colleagues because they've been bringing me refreshments and encouraging me. In fact, I've asked the chair of the House Democratic Caucus, and he has joined me in a sign of unity and to resist this power, authority, control over us and what we're trying to do. It wasn't meant to be something. It was just something that I felt, and I thought about that little child in me when I felt like something was unfair. I didn't know what to do, but to stand.
Interesting. President Donald Trump says he will ask Congress for an extension of the federalization of the DC's police, while the move is unlikely to pass as it would require Democratic support. Trump's comments come after National Guard troops began deploying in Washington, D.C., with some joining city police last night. The full contingent of 800 troops is expected to be operational by the end of the week. Meanwhile, dozens of Washington, D.C. protested outside the Metropolitan Police Department and the D.C. Federal Courthouse as city officials sued to block President Donald Trump's takeover of the police department in the nation's capital. Well, and for more on this, I have joining me George King Fu, the Vice Chair of Democrats Abroad. Glad to have you join me, George.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you. So what do you make of Collier's response to what the Republicans are doing about the redistricting?
Well, I'm so impressed with our Democratic leaders in Texas, what they have been through, what they've endured for the sake of fairness and law and order and democracy broadly, not just the Democratic Party. It's been a fantastic show of resistance in a place where they frankly don't have the numbers to do a lot of other options. You alluded in your story to what's happening now, so that the second special session has started, and you'll note the first piece of business was what should have been the first piece of business last time, which is what the Texas state legislature should be doing, looking after the actual needs of Texas citizens. So they finally passed some flood relief bills. They have so many actual real pieces of work that need doing instead of this political gamesmanship around trying to redraw these district lines and so forth. Obviously, the Democrats are fighting back, right, with a counter proposal. The numbers are such that that's unlikely to succeed on a straight vote basis. But there's an awful lot to go here still. Even if at some point the Texas legislature result actually puts in place some version of these Republican gerrymandering redistricting maps, that frankly just starts the first part of a process. It's not the end of a process. There will certainly be legislative and court battles about this as well. And then at the end of that, the actual political process kicks in. It's very funny. I was listening to some of our Texas Democrat leaders talk about this recently. They were noting that, yes, based on the 2024 numbers, that these maps would give 5 seats to the Republicans. But based on the 2018 numbers, that's just a couple of years ago, this same set of redrawn maps would give the Democrats an extra seat. So all that really happens at the end of this patently unfair process is then the actual political process starts of taking a message out to voters about what's happening with this administration and with this party in that state, and starting to change minds and starting to change votes. And that's something we're going to need to do in Texas anyway. Frankly, this is just jumpstarting that process, putting a lot of attention, putting a lot of money, putting a lot of time into Texas earlier than might have been otherwise the case, for us to start putting Texas back in play and to start to turn that red state back to purple.
Now, what's it really, George, about this redistricting? It's just about politics and getting more out of the electorate on the side of the Republicans. What is it really?
I'm glad you asked that question. Most people do not understand what's at play. So let me give you an explicit example. Think about a city like Austin, Texas. It's the state capital, big college town, a lot of industry, a lot of tech there. It's one of the big urban centers, and it's very blue. It votes very strongly Democratic. The redistricting map is going to try and take a place like South Austin and draw this crazy line to extend what is that district all the way out to a place known, you here will have heard of, Livingston, Texas. It's all the way out near Louisiana. And all of this now suddenly becomes one district. Or they're trying to take North Austin, so splitting Austin up, North Austin, and they're trying to draw the line for that district all the way out to Midland, Odessa, which is 300 miles away. So you're creating these crazy, unnatural, meaningless, squiggly lines to try and bring the rural part of Texas, where there's more Republican voters, in to dilute the more deeply Democratic urban vote. And this is essentially what they're trying to do, to try and flip these seats. That's what's actually happening. And so it makes no sense when you look at the maps. I mean, the last time that there was a redistricting, so in the 2010 census, there were 36 Texas districts. The next census in 2020, there were 38 Texas districts. I mean, that's the natural evolution. The redistricting is supposed to follow the actual change of the demographics of people in that location, as there's migration, as there's growth, et cetera. And what they're doing now, trying to draw these crazy lines halfway around the state to try and connect, to try and import rural Republican votes in to dilute otherwise Democratic communities, is patently unfair. And it will ultimately fail, because all that will happen is the Democrats will go out to those areas in Texas where they didn't bother to campaign in the past. They were just deep red districts. And instead, now there's going to be money, and there's going to be messaging, and there's going to be votes that are going to be swaying and going deeper and penetrating into parts of Texas where we weren't even trying to compete before.
All right, let's talk about the fact that the Democrats have returned for the possibility of forming a quorum, but then the Republicans are saying that they must tag along with police, and Collier there is refusing that, and most Democrats are saying you can't have police guard us wherever we go. Help us understand that, and where we are at, or where they are these police following them all over the place so they wouldn't move out of town or something?
Yeah, and we spoke about this a little bit last time when they were trying to have the FBI get involved with trying to bring the Texas Democrats back to the state and so forth. This is a continuing pattern we're seeing both in this conflict and more broadly around the country, all of it emanating from Trump himself, and the ethos that he is permeating across the Republican Party is trying to dramatically overstep natural boundaries between law enforcement agencies, between parts of the government. You're seeing in D.C., I heard you mentioning that story as well. He's clearly weaponizing the federal government for his personal political goals, for his grievances, for his petty retribution campaigns. And you're seeing this play out in a mini version here in Texas now, with this attempt to try and have invoke this police-like state over these legislators. I'm not a lawyer, and certainly not a Texas lawyer. I don't know what the legal ramifications are in terms of what that is technically allowed to do or not. But I support and applaud the stand that she is taking to say this is an overreach, it's not correct, and I won't abide by that. And that's fantastic to see.
All right, let's move over and talk about Trump's attempt to take over the police in D.C. After he didn't consult the governor and brought in National Guards.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because when Trump did this the first time and tried to bring in federal agencies and National Guard in California over the objection of the governor there, Governor Newsom, he ended up with a fight he wasn't expecting, and that's not gone that well for him, frankly. And so his next target was an easier one because Washington, D.C. doesn't have a governor. Because it has this special status where it's still, in many weird, arcane, historical ways, it's still administered and ruled over by Congress directly, by the federal government directly. It became a much easier target for his second attempt at this bullying behavior to target DC, and that's what you've seen. What's really ridiculous, of course, is that while there's been this massive show of force in terms of troops on the ground, they're not where the crime is. So the justification for this was supposed to be, wow, there's all this crime, which didn't make any sense. I mean, any of your listeners can go Google right now the top 10 or 20 crime cities in the U.S. DC is not at the top of that list. And it's not a precise thing. People measure, so forth. But there are a huge number of cities, mostly quite a lot of them are in Republican states, where those cities have much worse crime rates going on. So the premise for this never made any sense. And when you look at what's actually happening, all those National Guard troops are standing around the national monuments. They're not in the crime parts of the city. So the whole thing clearly is a show of force, and it's an attempt to push limits around authority and around what he can get away with. It has nothing to do with crime.
All right, we'll let it go there. Thank you so much, George, for sparing your time to be on The World.